This is an absolutely superb attacking performance. I'm recapping some of the games from the Champions Chess Tour, and this one, Fabiano Caruana against Alireza Firouzja, really stood out. Of course, it's a rapid play game, and I think in rapid chess, somehow, the players' sort of fundamental chess instincts come to the fore. And here, well, let's see who goes on the attack, basically. I think that says it all. So it's a gioco piano, which is the way that the big guys like to play these days. Keeps lots of tension on the board, so you don't get these variations like in the Spanish that sort of fizzle out. Having said that, the line that the players play has been played now in hundreds of games, literally hundreds of games if you have a look on the database. And all these are pretty standard moves. The bishop withdraws, that preempts any strike with d4. Rook e1, that's where the rooks belong in this kind of position. And rook e8. So these moves, rook e8, rook e1, they preempt d5 and d4. But more than that, I mean, particularly with the rook coming to e8, it prepares this move, bishop e6. This is such an important piece, the bishop on c4, as so often the case in the gioco piano and the Spanish. It's just good to exchange it off. And as I said, this position, this exact position, has been reached in many, 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 many games. Caruana plays bishop b2, which is the computer-approved move. Queen c2, also very reasonable. And then perhaps the knight comes here, or c4. I mean, to my eyes, the bishop looks slightly oddly placed on b2. But, well, let's see what happens. As I said, it's been seen quite a lot before. Previously, we've had, for example, Nakamura likes to play knight e7 to g6. That's his speciality. We've also got rook e8 has been played before. Anyway, Firouzja plays knight h5. Now, I mentioned about a player's basic chess instincts coming to the fore in rapid play games, and I think we see here that Alireza likes to attack. He likes to seize the initiative. And why not when you've got a bishop like this pointing towards the king, and the knight is looking in this direction, and it makes way potentially for the rook to come to g6. Now, when you play a knight out on the edge like that, and there's a queen on d1, you always have to look out for this trick, knight e5, opening this up. Now, it's not a very good move, but you always have to check it. So let's just have a quick check. Rook takes d4. You want to push the rook away and then take here, but, well, it's not good for a few reasons, but this is very clear. And queen h4, and you can see these pieces here combine absolutely beautifully. And after this, in fact, black is breaking through in a pretty standard way, and in fact, white simply doesn't have a defense against this one. So back we go. So you can see the potential with this move, knight h5, and the rook coming over, and potentially the queen joining in the attack with this bishop. Knight f1, good move, of course. You want to pack the king side. It covers g3. It also looks at this square. Now, it would be a mistake to go in too quickly with this knight, because in this case, bishop c1 is quite a strong move. White would very much like to exchange here. If black has to recapture the pawn, that's not very good, because then you can push forward. Queen f6, knight g3. Actually, these pieces don't get very far in this position. And there's a nice little trick. If the knight comes around here wanting to support this one, you play bishop takes, Now pawn takes isn't very good. As I said, structurally it's not good, but the problem is that queen takes runs into knight h5. Now that is very typical of this position. You can see the queen is trapped. So that's just the kind of few of the tricks you have to be aware of in this kind of position. So before plunging in with the knight, knight e7 first, swinging around, so bringing another piece into the attack. c4 from Caruana. Well, it looks logical to give this bishop some range. Black's knight swings around to g6. Okay, this is looking starting to look menacing. g3. Caruana wants to just stop one of these knights heading into f4. Okay, time for you to have a little think. How do you play with black in this position? Black to play. Time for me to have a drink. Time for you to have a think. Black to play. What's your basic instinct here? Well, Firouzja's instinct was to play knight gf4. To keep going, not to back down. Of course, you could just bring the knight back. But, of course, that's a compromise. White would be very comfortable there, having sort of driven off the attack. So, going for it. Now, I'm going to return to these early positions, actually, because there's some interesting defensive ideas, but I don't want to sort of break the flow of the game too much. Caruana took it. And this is a very important move. You can take him back immediately on f4. The problem is that after knight e3, check, and the king starts to run into the middle. The king is a lot safer on this square than elsewhere. So that's why after pawn takes, instead of taking immediately, rook g6 check. That's a very important move. The king has to go to the h file, has to stay in danger. It's a long way from the other pieces, basically. And only then knight takes f4. So that's good instinct for a start. These pieces looking good. Knight e3 from Caruana. That controls g2. Now, Firouzja risks all here. He plays queen d7. He could force a draw like this. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Rook g2. Queen here. Okay, take care. Threat of mate. In fact, this just ends in a draw. I mean, you can look at it yourself, but basically this ends in a draw by perpetual check. There's actually no escape for the king, because if it comes up, then this is still a draw. Trust me, the king cannot escape, because if king d4, that leads to mate. So basically the king has to stick around, and then it's just a draw down here, and so on. Bishop takes knight would end in a draw. And I don't think it's too difficult to calculate that. But Firouzja once more. He plays queen d7. Threatening h3. Caruana backs down. He plays knight g1. Knight f5 is the move. Now I can imagine he was reluctant to do this. Because of bishop takes f2, which does look very scary. In fact, this is absolutely fine for white. After this, you can see this knight just shuts out the queen. It's really important, and I think white is doing fine there. I mean, there's actually pretty good communication along the second rank at some point anyway. But knight g1, I suspect Caruana underestimated the game continuation, which was rook takes knight. So if rook takes, then it's mate in 1. So king takes, queen takes h3. So now black is a whole rook down. Here's an important variation. Queen g4. How do you meet that? Well, actually you can take here. And after this, basically black gets another pawn. So for example, king h2, it's an important variation. Knight takes f2. All the tactics work for black. Because if rook takes knight g4, and otherwise in this position, well, with 3 pawns on the king side, that must be winning for black. So that's important that queen, after queen takes h3, queen g4 isn't working. So c5 from Caruana, so blocking out the bishop here. And now there's only one really good move for black in this position. So again, I'll take time to have a little drink of tea. Black to play. I know, well, I'll flip the board for you. I know a lot of people prefer to do it from that side. Or maybe I'm just messing with your heads, I don't know. Black to play. What is the best move for black? This move is essential. And I find it so impressive how Firouzja played this game. He found accurate moves all the way through. Apart from queen d7 was risky, but this is really good. The best move for black is pawn to h5. It's essential to prevent queen g4 because the bishop is blocked out, so you know, the tactics aren't there as in the other variation. Am I going to stick this way around? Oh no, listen, I'm going to flip it back. There we are. Just to mess with your heads. And black has a very simple plan here, actually. Now, at the moment, you can't checkmate with these pieces. The knight defends. The bishop is blocked out for the moment. But a simple plan is to play rook e8 to e6 to g6. Game over. So this is already really tough for white in spite of the extra rook, because it's so hard to bring these pieces over to the king side to defend. Rook e2. Well, that means that if bishop takes knight, you might be able to recapture with the pawn and the rook will defend along the second rank. That's one thing. And sometimes you might be able to play f3. Some cases that's riskier. Or sometimes queen f1. So rook e8 played. And queen f1. In fact, it's not good enough. So how do you play here? Okay, let me flip it round again, just to confuse you. So how should black play in this position? In fact, it's very simple. You take the rook off, which in effect buys you a tempo, buys you time, because now you don't have to deal with the threat to the queen, and then you just go rook e6. So now you're only a piece down, but a clear threat of rook g6. Okay, I'm gonna stick with this way round. Knight g2. Rook g6. White has to defend. Queen f1. And there's more than one way to play this. I mean, this bishop needs to come into the game. Still got to get it right. So, for example, this would be a mistake, because the white bishop comes back to defend along here. But you can play a5. We're going to see that in a moment, to undermine the support for this pawn. And the other move, which is strong, which is Firouzja played, is h4. So, simple idea, you want to move the queen out of the way and push again. Rook c1 played, supporting that pawn. But a5 comes in any case. So if you just want to get this bishop back into the game. Bishop c3. Queen g4. So making room for the h-pawn. If f3, this doesn't actually help. Queen g5. I mean, in a way, it makes things even worse. and after king h1, h3 is completely winning. I mean, it's a comical situation. Excuse me. Once the pawn has moved to f3, the knight can't come to e3, and if it goes back to e1, you can take the rook, just to make matters worse. So queen g4, king h2, h3, the knight has to move. A check. Well, in fact, Firouzja just repeated the position just to be absolutely sure, and he came back again. Queen f4 check is necessary. If d takes c5, then once again this bishop returns to defend. It's absolutely not so clear. So queen f4 check is a clever move, or just repeating the position, and only now take on c5. And of course white can't prevent this diagonal opening. If b5, then you can just open things up again like this. Pawn takes, and now there's a check here, and bishop takes c5. This one is fatal because it doesn't matter if this pawn is taken, because you can take here and then rook g2 check. So for example, rook e1 takes here, well, check, and h2. That's game over, and rook g1. In the game, queen h1 happened, and queen takes f2, and clearly that's going to be mate very shortly in various ways. So for example here, and the good old kiss of death, checkmate. I love that game. Beautiful, straightforward attacking ideas. Let me just come back to here. So we saw knight h5, just taking advantage of the fact that the rook can swing here very quickly and the knight wants to come in to f4. But it's interesting that Firouzja, waited and brought the other knight round first, and then, this is very bold to attack like this. And he did chance his arm a little bit here, because he has a draw with bishop takes knight, but played more ambitiously with queen d7. Now, a couple of things. Coming back to this position, in fact, Caruana underestimated the attack, clearly. He actually didn't need to take this. He could play king h2. Now, he was obviously concerned about bishop takes pawn, but in fact, in this case, it's not so dangerous. So, knight here, rook e2. Has very good communication to the king side. I mean, clearly exchanging off those attacking pieces means that white's king is safe. I mean, the knight is going to come here. The rook will come over. Knight to f5. I mean, actually the initiative could swing over towards white in this kind of position. Or, let me see, bishop takes. This is an important move, f5. I mean, that's an easy one to overlook, this Zwischenzug. Excuse me. After this, well, black has 3 pawns for the piece, but again, the attack has disappeared, so I feel that white should be absolutely fine there. And even after this is taken, this is interesting. So queen d7, knight g1, mistake. Knight f5 is an excellent move. That knight just blocks out the queen. And even later on, let me see, was there another chance that white had? No, that's the final one. But, it's absolutely key that this knight comes to f5 to block out black's pieces. It seems to me that, in these variations, Caruana simply underestimated the effect of this knight on f5. Well, who knows what he overlooked? That's unfair of me to say that. But clearly, retreating was definitely, with knight g1, was definitely a mistake. But full credit to Alireza Firouzja, who just played a wonderful attacking game. Some beautiful touches there. It's incredible to think he's still only 20 years old. You know, a couple of years ago, Magnus Carlsen was hailing him as, you know, the next best thing, and that, you know, he was looking forward perhaps to a world championship match against him. But he's sort of gone off the boil a bit. But, you know, just a reminder what an incredible talent he is.